Our scripture this Sunday looks at perhaps one of my favorite stories. I love the cleansing of the temple. There's just something, the energy around it is just profound. And all the other gospels, the synoptic gospels, have the telling of this story in the days leading up to Maundy Thursday. So it's often we hear it in Holy Week if we pay attention to Holy Week, but it's not something we revisit a lot from week to week and year to year. But in John's Gospel, they have it in the end of chapter 2. So it's a game changer right off the bat. And John's Gospel starts, we've looked at this several weeks ago. It starts with delineation of the word and then talks about John the Baptist, and then we get into the calling of disciples. Then we get to chapter 2, and it is the Feast of Cana, which is its own really, really interesting story of how Mary is the invitee. Jesus is just the good son who goes along to escort her to this big celebration. And then he leaves Cana and he comes down to Jerusalem and he walks into the temple. And there's no Palm Sunday here. There's no greeting. It just goes right away into going into the temple and seeing the state of it. He walks in, and there are money changers all over the place. Now, for those unfamiliar with the whole concept of money changers, this would be like the early exchange centers that we have when we want to travel from country to country. The temple had its own money, the shekel. So in order to pay your temple dues and do what you needed to do, and buy the sacrifice you were required to make if you came to the temple, you had to have the temple shekel. In order to have the temple shekel, you needed to exchange it. So if you came from Egypt, or you came from Asia, or if you came from Italy, you would have the coinage from your local area. That wasn't good enough for the temple, so you'd have to exchange it, and that's where the money changers come in. And there were money changers set up right around. So there was one across the river from the temple, so that you could exchange over there. All of the roads leading into Jerusalem had money changers. They didn't have to be in the temple. There were plenty of options. But the temple authorities kind of turned a blind eye, and here we had all these money changers. And depending on the account of the story that you pay attention to, they were either being really obnoxious in their capitalist glory, or they were marking up the prices and making it unfair for the pilgrims who had traveled and who wanted to go to the temple of their faith. So Jesus walks into this, and there's cows and goats and sheep and birds and all sorts of chaos and people everywhere and languages all over the place. Just a whole big scene. And he walks in, he takes this into account, and then he gets mad. And I love it. So often as a child, I was raised to see Jesus, meek and mild, gentle, the Jesus that turned his cheek, which, by the way, is not what we've been led to believe. It's more of a political move than anything. But the Jesus who just sucked it up, the Jesus who took all the criticism, the Jesus who didn't fight for himself when he was on trial, the Jesus who allowed bad things to happen around him and people threatening him, and he just walked through without responding. Here we have a story of him actually responding, but it's not anger on his own behalf. It's righteous anger. He's angry at how these people are treating the temple, which is supposed to be the most holy place for all Hebrews, no matter where they live. So Jesus walks into this and gets livid. He gets livid. What can we take from that? So often we are taught, women in particular, are taught that we shouldn't get angry. Angry is the most primal emotion we have. Babies exhibit anger almost as much as they exhibit love and contentment and displeasure. It's one of the first things that we can identify in people who can't speak. We should not be ashamed of this anger. Jesus wasn't ashamed of his anger, but he used it. He used it for justice. Imagine if all the people who profess faith in Jesus saw our churches being misused, our community being misused, the people we know being mistreated, and got that righteous anger, How much change would there be? There might be a whole lot of chaos and anger, and I'm sure some punches thrown. I mean, Jesus did pick up a whip after all, and he certainly let people have it. But how much would it change the world if we really felt that passion that this is so wrong that I am gut level angry and need to make it better? We don't tend to do that, especially in North America. We don't tend to feel that we have to stand up. I mean, yeah, we get together in groups, and there'll be a group that is really angry about how women are treated, and a group who's really angry about how black folks are treated, and a group who's really angry about how trans folks are treated. And pick your group. You've got a lot of anger there. But it's not organized, and it's not driven, and it's not focused. It's just kind of leaching out and eating the probably the person who's experiencing it. It's not going to do any good to sit and feel anger. That's kind of like the emotional equivalent of twiddling your thumbs. Nothing changes. Jesus changed things. Now, mind you, he really ticked off the establishment and they were after him and they wanted him dead. But he made a statement, such a profound statement that every gospel had to tell this story. And they don't all share all the stories, but this was significant enough. It's so significant, in fact, to John, that he put it right in the beginning. Jesus leaves Cana after his mother says, "Yeah, you're ready now. It's time for your ministry." And the first thing he does is he ends up in Jerusalem and he flips tables and he takes a whip to folks and he tries to make a difference. In the Gospel of John, we're going to see that Jesus is hounded over and over and followed and challenged. And it's a gospel of verifying Jesus as the Messiah, of telling the story as proof that he is who we've been expecting and who he claims to be. The entire thing is like a protracted trial almost. But he starts his ministry after choosing his best friends, after spending time with his mother at a family gathering where he's really a nobody, after being told, "Yeah, you're ready now. You know, the wine trick, that was kind of cool, but it's time to really get on the road and do your thing." And his mother told him this. As a mother, it's really hard to know that your kids are going in to do something that might cause them hurt and pain, but Mary did it. She sent him on. And so this is the first time Jesus is gathering all of that, the confidence, the support, and he goes in and he breaks up the joint. What would it be if we followed that Jesus? Followed the Jesus who could get angry at injustice. If we taught our children getting angry was acceptable and normal, it's just how you channel that energy that really matters. Can you imagine the radical change we might have if we learn to power that energy, that emotion, that spirit rushing through us, that response to injustice? Imagine what could change if we weren't afraid of that power, but worked with that power to make a difference in the world. What would Jesus do has been co-opted in the last 3 or so decades by right-wing evangelicals, but it came out of the social gospel movement in the 19 teens and 20s when Christians actually started to use that anger and push for change. What would Jesus do was not this kind of light, fluffy, fairy off, just kind of, oh, we'll be loving and everybody will be happy and we'll have kumbaya time. That was not what the social gospel decided. The social gospel decided that what would Jesus do? Jesus would get dirty. Jesus would knock over tables. Jesus would get in there and do everything in his power to make it better, to stop exploitation. That's the Jesus I find completely fascinating and worthy of my following. Who's the Jesus you want to follow? Is it the meek and mild? Because that's there too. But if it's the one who wants to knock heads together and get things done, your Christianity is going to feed a fire in you that you don't even know you're ready to unleash yet. And the good that can come out with that, if you channel it to follow God's will, is going to be amazing. And when you're in that zone, when that energy is flowing, things will happen.